I want to go back to one of the points that was made about the importance of you advocating for yourself. As you heard many of us say, we didn't really know about all these organizations, particularly the ones that might help you in your beginning networking and promotion and that sort of thing, and particularly ones where you have an age or a qualifying piece. So we used to very naturally try to look at all of our assistant professors in our division in an organized way and say, okay, whose year is it to go to SPR? Because if you forget it too many years, then they will not have done that. All the way through, at least in the Department of Pediatrics, there is some effort to do this in a systematic way, but let me tell you, it's not at all perfect. That's why you and your mentor or you and your division chief need to be thinking about these things. And then as it gets higher up in these organizations, it's often even more, organized about, well, who should be nominated for the Institute of Medicine from CHOP or from Penn. So it is a balance between, one, you are all good and you're going to keep getting better, so your qualifications, but also if there's something that calls to you, then you're going to need to think through it and a little bit about how to advocate for yourself and know what among these things you would be interested in. And to think about it, it's another way of working your way up. I mean, you start with small responsibilities and in, 6 years you might be president. So I'll close. Questions, comments? There you go. I'm going to give the mic just so that we get the questions recorded well. Thank you.
A couple people mentioned how helpful playing a role or having a membership in these societies is in terms of promotion. On the other hand, it also sounds like there's a big time commitment associated with these roles, and I'm wondering how you balance that time commitment with your other academic pursuits.
I'm sure we can all pitch in. It's on. It's on.
Yep.
So I would say that some of them require less time than you think, and those are the ones that sometimes you can start with in the beginning. Some of these committees don't meet more than once a year face-to-face, and then there may be a telephone conversation or a telephone call for the group to get together. So I wouldn't assume it's always daunting, and that's an absolutely excellent question to ask before you sign up. So the worst thing you can do is sign up for something and not do a very good job because you're never there. The worst thing is, you're at a committee meeting and so shows up 10 minutes before and leaves right away. You have to really have a little bit of time to do it. And the other point I'm going to raise is that right now, with this kind of climate of restriction of funds, you can't always go to every meeting, so you have to also think a little bit carefully, and that's something your mentor, your advisors can help you sort of determine, is this a great meeting for me to go to? Is this worth my commitment, time? Will it be a return on my investment to a great extent? So, yeah, I agree with you that you have to think about those time commitments.
Thanks. So I just want to pick up on one thing that you said, that's in terms of going to all the meetings and which ones you can get to. It's not just the meetings, it's also the societies that you belong to, because you have to pay dues to each society. And yes, you get benefits, and there's very often a journal attached, but your professional money only goes so far. And you really do, after a while, have to pick and choose exactly which society you want to belong to and why you want to belong to that society and where you're going to go within that society. And again, your mentor and your division chief and the others that you interact with are going to be very valuable in helping you make that decision.
Just to add, while you're thinking, just to add one little bit to that, but also one of the advantages is if you get on some of these committees and the committee meets at the meeting, then you may well have either some of your travel expenses paid or that extra day for the committee. So the time, no one is ever reimbursed for the time. But sometimes in these settings, you actually, there is a little bit of a perk for that in addition to meeting everyone. So it's not always strictly finances. The other thing is often if you're, even if you're not a member and you're abstract, you want to submit an abstract, if you plan ahead and talk to your mentors or your division chiefs, there's often an effort, if your abstract gets accepted, to find additional money for you to go because you were a perfect fit or your science just came out. But to call to that, I mean, since I've been at CHOP, we've seen our academic money reduced by half. So it's a real change. Sandy?
So if you want, I think this is one place where you can really pick your mentor's brain or pick somebody's brain, because people involved in organizations already are well aware of the levels you can get involved. So they know sort of where to aim. If you're interested in advocacy, there's plenty of advocacy opportunities that don't take a lot of time but can speak to your interests. And they're occurring at our residents and fellows level, often have advocacy projects that they engage in as groups. And then your state chapters, if you show up and express an interest in either a health system issue or a disease-based issue, they can find a way for you to get involved at the level you can get involved. It may be learning how to write an op-ed to express your views, or contacting a legislator, or spending a day going with a group to advocate at the state government level. So you can get involved to the extent that you can get involved. And I encourage you to do that and not be dismayed, because people are well aware of the time commitments and will help you, and not expect you to dive in at the presidential level in your first foray. But if you don't, I've heard, it's sort of sad to me to hear mid to late career physicians say they wish they had gotten involved, and they didn't get involved because they saw that as a barrier. So more express your own interest, and your mentors will help you find a way.
I think they also, no matter what you're doing in it, you're getting some kind of hybrid vigor from getting out of the institution. So you have blinders, really, for the rest of the world until you're out there. And that's should be part of your life's education, is to keep getting out and learning out and bringing things home.
I just want to add that, that's sometimes where you meet your best collaborators, is at these meetings, in these rooms, where you say, oh, this one's working on this, oh, and they're sitting right next to me, and maybe afterwards you engage in a dialogue. And that's how I've had a lot of opportunities to network. And if you turn it down, so sometimes you feel, oh, I'm not ready, I just don't know. For example, I was asked to be a committee member for the membership committee of the American Thoracic Society years and years ago, right as I started my first faculty position in 1990. And I said, what am I going to contribute to this group? But after 5 years of being on the group and energizing, thinking of ideas, then they said, oh, you can chair the committee. And then it opens new doors, and then you can do other things. You can chair the program committee. But it's a stepwise, incremental commitment. So don't think that right away you get thrown in and you got too much to do, because oftentimes it's just you're getting to know the stuff around you.
Another
question. I think the challenge, I hear a lot of very convincing things about becoming involved. I think the challenge for me, at least, is more figuring out with which ones to be involved. Particularly, it feels like in a more interdisciplinary environment than before, but perhaps that's just my young perception. I have easily 10 societies that are heavily involved in some aspect in the things in which I'm interested. So trying to figure out how to pick the best ones, and how many are too many, and how do you become good stewards of just a few, if anyone could speak to that at all.
I hate to monopolize this thing. I promise I'm not trying to, but this speaks a lot to what you have to do. So your mentor, your advisors will help you sort of sort through that. If you are someone, I don't know what you're doing in terms of research, but if you're doing basic translational research, even though, so you might be a member of a bigger general pediatric type of group, but it's also important to be part of a more subspecialty driven, specialized group that is exactly along the lines of the things you do. So it might be, the Society for Biologic whatever, and a pediatric society. You don't want to be lost away from your peer group of pediatricians, but you don't want to also not know the players in your area of subspecialty. So depends on your research, on what you do. You may not be satisfied with just one group. You might have to also go into a more subspecialized group.
And it's not like you can never join another one if you find that, this is not like an all or nothing. But I do think it's important to think through your own aspirations as a guide, and not just sort of react to the list of things. And if that means that you join one specific one because that's where then that's okay.
And just a couple of other comments. So when you join the society, if you find that after a while it doesn't fit your needs,
it's not,
and it's too expensive, then you don't have to stay within that society if it's not actually going in the direction that you're going, or if your research interests have changed, which mine did at a point. I was part of the American Immunology Society, which you have to actually get nominated to, and I wasn't doing a lot of basic immunology. It was all applied, and I said, it's really not where I want to be right now, because I'm not going to be going to the Keystone meetings anymore and so on. So I actually let that lapse. They weren't very happy with me for doing that, but that's what I did. And, it's going to be with you your entire career. It's not just when you start, but it's going to be throughout. Whatever level, professional level you are, you're going to have to make those decisions. And I had to make that decision this week when I got asked to sit on the UNIS committee. And I just said, I'm full. I can't fit another thing in. There's not that many hours in the day left. So I said, sorry, I'm really sorry, but no. So you've got to be able to do that, and very often sitting and talking to somebody like your mentor, your division chief, is really going to help you to make that decision.
I'll bring this over while I'm doing that. The other thing is, you can go to meetings and not be a member. And one of the things I did during these transition times is I would sort of rotate. I'd go to this one this year. I mean, there's one or two you always want to go to. But I found that was a helpful way to sort of see if it was still a fit. You pay a little bit more for your registration fee, but you still can keep up with folks.
Hi, I apologize for missing the beginning. Maybe you discussed it. It's actually a question for you.
Okay.
How much, and I know we're all doing this because we really want to be connected, but how much does this weigh into promotion and things like that? I mean, what does the co-op look at in terms of membership in societies?
Right. Well, I'll do one line, but everybody here is a great mentor as well. And at least the ones at this table, all of our careers, much of our careers have been at CHOP and Penn. A couple things. It depends on which track you're in. The tracks at Penn are basically your job description. And this service is a part of all of them very strongly, a little bit less on the research track, which is mostly our collaborative PhD people, but academic clinician, clinical educator, and tenure all have a part of that. Then you get to diversify. Many academic clinicians really aren't doing research, so some of the advocacy and the education things will fit perfectly into that. The CE track and tenure track both have a component of service, and they have a really big component of reputation. And I think part of what you've heard is part of your reputation is your papers and all of that. But in the end, you have to have people write letters for you who are not a part of our Penn community. And I found that part of how I started to understand that was I was meeting all these senior people, and those were the ones the letters were going to go to. So having none is not a good thing. So you got to have a little bit, but it can be a little bit to being one of the things that you really spend time on. That's my experience. You can individualize it, but if you're in those two tracks, there is a real expectation of contribution, and this is a secondary part of the reputation, getting up and giving that talk.
So I've had the pleasure of sitting on both the pediatric co-op, where I'm still on, and also the medical school co-op, and in both instances in the last 5-6 years that I've been sitting on both of these, it's clear that if you look at a CVX versus CVY, and they have the same number of papers, same everything, but one person is known more and has glowing letters, and people talk about that person because they met him somehow. Sometimes it's not necessarily because they sat and read every one of your papers, but they might have sat next to you at a committee. They might have had an opportunity to hear what you had to say in a forum or something like that. Those individuals have an easier time with more letters of support, because the one damning thing in COAP is when they send out 11 people letters to say, speak of this person, and only 5 say, well, I know this person, I'm responding to this letter, because sometimes that happens, and then you ask for more letters, and it doesn't look as good, and it does influence, because some people have gotten in with fewer papers, but more of that national and international visibility. So I wouldn't discount it. It's a very important component of your national and, perhaps international reputation to be involved at these kinds of levels. So it's an important part.
I would also add that you may stay in one place for the entire career, but if you don't stay in one place for your entire career, it's very good to have people know you at many different institutions. So that goes a long way. It's a lot different when you know somebody and you've met them, or a colleague has met them, than you're just getting them as a CV and a resume. So I think that's another advantage.
The only thing I would add to this is that my two most influential mentors were not from CHOP. One was from Vanderbilt and one from Cincinnati. And they really helped me through my career, and I have tried to pay that back.
That's a great example.
Yes. The other thing I just wanted to add is there's a leadership component to all of this that I think you saw as a thread, but you get a lot of leadership. As you work your way through, there's a lot of leadership experience that can come with that. It can serve you well in your academic positions. So I think that's another thing to think about.
So that's really a wonderful thing. So just for example, in American Society of Pediatric Nephrology a couple of years ago, they in fact started a leadership course. And so you can get nominated to go and do a 2-day leadership course that goes over 18 months. So you go to the ASN, ASPN meeting, and the back end of it, you actually stay for an extra day and a half, and you get leadership training. And that leadership training has taken those people into various leadership positions. But obviously, it's not just germane to that society. It feeds back into your institution. Yeah. So, that's really important. The other area which I had forgotten to mention was that within the AAP, for example, there's a nephrology subsection. It doesn't cost very much to join these subsections, and you can get involved in those to a greater or less extent. But being part of it, again, gives you direct access into all of the workings of what are going on in your subspecialty. And it's very, very useful.
Another question, comment? Musing?
So sort of to touch on some of the leadership aspect of being a part of these societies, I was wondering if there's anything that you've found particularly useful, since most of you have served actually as part of the leadership in these societies, as far as not only being able to effectively promote sort of the vision and the mission of the society or the organization itself, but also to motivate your colleagues or members of the society to, be more fully engaged and to, just to kind of spread the word. And I think that this is something that I'm just now sort of learning as I'm interested in leadership, and as I've started to take on some leadership roles, and not only learn the leadership aspect for myself, but sort of what is effective in terms of getting other people to sort of buy in to the mission.
So, in some ways, leadership has a large advocacy component to it. And I think that your opportunities as you join these organizations to one degree or another, and I'll speak about the academy, is I'm thinking of one of our younger physicians who got interested in child sex trafficking. This wasn't on the radar screen of the academy at all. She started to engage colleagues, fellow residents, young people in understanding the issues and developing some clinical pathways, formed a resolution, and is now working that issue by getting her peers involved, is now working that issue up through the structure of the academy, which, if it works well, will eventually become part of the part of the materials and all that we will be rolling out nationally. So I think it starts, like all things start off, and it starts very locally with you getting into a leadership relationship, and then influencing your peers, and then building your sphere of influence. And often the structure of that organization can help you do that in terms of the advocacy you want to do.
Just another, part of leadership, it's our aspirational part, but you have to practice. And in all of these settings, watching how people run effective meetings, how they inspire people to do things.
So important.
How they run
So
bad
important,
meetings,
yes.
and swear
Yes,
you're
yes,
never gonna,
yes.
you're never gonna do that.
Yeah.
I would say that, is a big piece. The watching and your confidence will grow from that. And you pair that with opportunities like Kevin was saying, where you have some of the didactics or your own reading. We have things at Penn, we have things at CHOP. But, you've been through medical school and residency and fellowship, so you have wonderful skills. But we're not all naturally good at convening, at convincing, at summarizing, and that's part of what you'll get from this. And I know that was a big part of, you sit in the back quietly at the beginning. A little while later, like I said, you'll be running the place. So it's sort of it's a practice field for that.
And you'll be there when the opportunity arises. So we've all been at meetings where somebody didn't show up and you took a more active role, and just getting yourself in position to listen and learn and be there, I think, is important.
I want to add that, as you said, it's not only a sort of selfish sort of, oh, I want to be in charge of something. It's an altruistic thing if you use it to create another opportunity for the next group of people, or if you build on something that exists. And there's nothing more gratifying than being able to sort of have a vision for something and seeing it kind of move forward, and to engage a group of people. But that, as they say, communication skills, learning how to not make people, how to work with people who have very different reasons for being there, personalities that sometimes you really don't appreciate or that you do appreciate. And I love to watch someone put together something that you go, wow, I can learn from this person. There's always a learning opportunity wherever you are. So yeah, just keep your eyes open, and you can then adopt things that you think are good in that style versus that style, and what not to do to like I saw Kevin get up there and say, I thank you. And I said, oh gosh, I forgot to say thank you. So you learn from each step.
You learn all the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time you learn.
And it's the respectful part and having the strength when things are really going down the wrong path to be able to effectively get your committee going again.